The Invitation, new horror film starring Natalia Manuel, out in theaters. First things first, do not watch the trailers because they spoil the entire movie, including two of the three big reveals. Not saying that the film isn't predictable anyway, but the trailers certainly don't help. The story follows a young woman named Evie. She lives in New York, wants to be an artist, works for a catering company as a waitress. Her parents have died some time ago, leaving her completely alone. And one day she comes across a sample DNA test from a company that specializes in tracing your heritage. And she decides to use it. And indeed, they do find her long lost family. Apparently, her grandfather was the product of an affair, and now the main branch of the clan, a filthy rich British family, wants to reconnect by inviting her to a wedding that is supposed to take place at a lavish mansion in the British countryside. Evie considers for a while, but ends up going, and when she arrives, on the one hand, everyone seems to be super nice to her, even if they're not very nice to the servants and the employees. Plus, she also meets the lord of the house named Deville, very subtle, who is charming, hot, and apparently very interested in Evie. But of course, on the other hand, there are sinister motives behind the invitation, and in time, the true nature of the people involved will come to light. That's as much as I'm saying, although the movie itself doesn't really make it a secret that it's going to turn into a full-fledged horror film at some point, and even contains literary hints and Easter eggs, which fans of classic horror novels will immediately spot and figure out who is who. Now, I will say this, the film does some interesting things. I like the fact that the main character has a lot of agency and doesn't take shit from anyone, is willing to confront people on their strange behavior, and generally acts fairly reasonably. I also liked the mostly subtle themes of 1. The role of women in modern society versus back in the old days. 2. The issues of race, and perhaps most importantly 3. Of class, the conflict between the wealthy and the poor. And again, that sounds like strong, left side propaganda, but for the most part it's done fairly well and not in your face. However, the movie as a whole doesn't exactly work, mainly because of its very strange pacing. It spends an enormous amount of time setting up the story and the characters and teasing us with what's to come, but waiting with the reveals for way too long. And then when it finally does move into that final act territory, it's all over incredibly quickly and abruptly. So there's definitely an imbalance there. I would have liked the reveals to have happened earlier and the movie just become a proper horror for more of its runtime. It also doesn't help that the third act is like a quick ride down a cliff in terms of quality. All the aspects of decent writing suddenly go out the window. There are silly action sequences, of course poorly shot with chopped quick cuts, cheesy shots of characters looking badass, and the big climax itself just treats the audience with utter disrespect, using a flashback hit us over the head with things that should be and really are obvious just from the scene itself. So I didn't like the way that it took forever to get going, and then I didn't much like the ending, which puts the movie in a pretty poor spot. I think there are some things to enjoy in the middle, but overall it's not very good. And if you want to see something similarly set up, a young lady fighting for her life against a fucked up rich family, you're better off seeing Ready or Not instead.